The Corvani sensors began detecting the anomalies 48 hours before their ultimatum would expire. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying readings that made no sense according to everything his people knew about. This primitive species. Massive energy signatures were appearing throughout the human star system, coming from objects that had been classified as ordinary space rocks and debris. The first detection came from the asteroid belt, where Corvani, long-range scanners picked up fusion reactor signatures emerging from what their computers had cataloged as a standard rocky asteroid. Within minutes, similar readings appeared from dozens of other locations. The tactical officer reported power levels that shouldn't be possible from objects that size, energy outputs that matched or exceeded some Corvani military installations. Zethkar ordered immediate investigation. 3 Corvani scout ships moved toward the asteroid belt to examine the energy sources directly. What they found challenged every assumption the Empire had made about human technological capabilities. The asteroids were hollow, filled with machinery and weapons that showed engineering principles the Corvani had never seen before. Captain Ben Hayes felt the Vengeance shudder as its massive engines came online for the first time in 5 years. The ship had been drifting in the asteroid belt for decades, indistinguishable from the millions of other rocks that orbited between Mars and Jupiter. Now the asteroid shell began to crack and fall away, revealing the warship hidden inside like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. The process had been designed by human engineers who understood that deception would be humanity's greatest weapon against a superior enemy. Each Black Fleet ship was built inside a real asteroid, with the rocky exterior serving as both camouflage and armor. Fusion reactors had been installed in the asteroid cores, connected to weapon systems and life support that could sustain crews. For years without detection, navigator Kate Bell watched her screens as similar ships revealed themselves throughout the solar system. The UHS Thunderbolt emerged from its hiding place near Europa, shaking off chunks of ice that had concealed it among Jupiter's trailing asteroids. The UHS Shadowhawk powered up in Saturn's rings, its rocky shell indistinguishable from the countless fragments that made up the ring system until its engines ignited. The scale of the deception was staggering. For 30 years, humanity had been building a secret fleet while maintaining the appearance of a species barely capable of interplanetary travel. Every asteroid mining operation had been cover for military construction. Every deep space research mission had been scouting for ship positions and supply caches. Every peace treaty and trade agreement had bought time for the Black Fleet to grow stronger. Admiral Jake Morrison received the activation codes while standing in the Liberty's command center. The official human fleet was preparing for a hopeless last stand, but Jake now learned that the real battle would be fought by ships that didn't officially exist. His orders were to coordinate with Black Fleet Command and provide tactical support for operations that had been planned since before he graduated from the academy. The communication channels came alive with voices from across the solar system. Ship commanders who had lived in isolation for years finally made contact with each other, coordinating movements that would bring 847 hidden warships into position around Earth. Each captain had trained their crew for this moment, running endless simulations and drills while pretending to be asteroid miners or deep space researchers. Captain Sue Davis commanded the UHS Thunderbolt from a position near Europa, where her ship had masqueraded as a research station studying Jupiter's moons. Her crew of 800 had spent 3 years maintaining their cover while training for combat operations. The Thunderbolt was smaller than the massive battleships like the Vengeance, but it carried weapons that could cripple ships 10 times its size. The Black Fleet ships used propulsion systems that the Corvani couldn't detect. Instead of burning, chemical rockets or plasma drives that would show up on enemy sensors, they used gravity manipulation technology that had been developed in secret research facilities hidden throughout the outer solar system. The ships could accelerate without producing heat signatures or radiation emissions that would give away their positions. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Turner led a squadron of fast attack ships that had been hiding in the Kuiper Belt beyond Pluto's orbit. His ships were the smallest in the Black Fleet, designed for hit-and-run tactics against larger enemies. Each one carried crews of 50 and weapons loads that could destroy targets 100 times their size. They had been moving toward the inner system for weeks, using minimal power to avoid detection while positioning themselves for the coming battle. The Corvani scouts reported their findings to Admiral Zethkar with voices that carried undertones of fear. The humans had not just built a few hidden ships, they had constructed an entire secret military infrastructure. Production facilities disguised as asteroid mining operations had been turning out weapons and ammunition for decades. Supply depots hidden throughout the outer planets could sustain military operations for years. Zethkar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His fleet of 12 ships had seemed overwhelming when facing the 47 vessels of the official human space navy. Against nearly 1,000 hidden warships, the odds looked very different. The humans had been planning for this war longer than some Corvani officers had been alive, and they had used that time to build capabilities that challenged every assumption about primitive species. The deception went deeper than just hidden ships. Human communication networks had been designed with military encryption from the beginning, making it impossible for Corvani intelligence to intercept planning and coordination signals. What the Empire had interpreted as primitive radio technology was actually a sophisticated command and control system that could coordinate fleet operations across the entire solar system. Weapons. Officer Ryan Clark ran final checks on the Vengeance's primary armament while the ship completed its transformation from asteroid to battleship. The main guns were railgun systems that used magnetic acceleration to fire projectiles at speeds that approached light velocity. At those velocities, even small chunks of metal carried enough kinetic energy to punch through the heaviest armor or energy shields. The ammunition had been manufactured over decades in facilities that appeared to be standard industrial complexes. Millions of projectiles had been stockpiled throughout the system, along with spare parts and replacement components for every system on every ship. The humans had prepared for a long war, building supply chains that could sustain combat operations even if Earth itself was destroyed. President Lisa Martinez watched the activation reports from her command bunker, finally understanding why certain military projects had been classified above her security level. The Black Fleet represented humanity's greatest gamble, a massive investment of resources and lives based on the assumption that someday Earth would face exactly this kind of threat. The gamble was about to pay off or destroy human civilization in the attempt. The final phase of activation began as Black Fleet ships throughout the solar system dropped their disguises and began moving toward Earth. From the outside, it looked like the asteroid belt itself was coming alive, as thousands of space rocks suddenly developed engine signatures and began accelerating toward the inner planets. The Corvani had never seen anything like it, and their tactical computers struggled to process the implications of what they were detecting. Admiral Zethkar transmitted an emergency message to the Corvani homeworld, warning that the humans were not what they appeared to be. The species that had seemed barely capable of spaceflight had deceived the Empire for decades, building military capabilities that rivaled or exceeded anything in Corvani space. The easy conquest that High Command had promised was about to become something very different, and Zethkar was no longer certain which species would survive the coming battle. Admiral Zethkar made his decision as reports flooded in from across the human star system. The primitive species had revealed capabilities that challenged everything the Corvani Empire believed about technological development. Rather than wait for the humans to complete whatever they were planning, he ordered half his fleet to launch immediate strikes against the activating ships. 6 Corvani dreadnoughts broke formation and accelerated toward different targets throughout the solar system. Each ship carried enough firepower to reduce planets to molten slag, weapons that had conquered 7 star systems and dozens of species. Zethkar watched the tactical displays with confidence that superior technology would overcome whatever tricks the humans had prepared. The first engagement began near Europa, where 12 Corvani destroyers encountered what their sensors identified as converted asteroid mining ships. Commander Kethlar led the attack force with the casual arrogance of a predator approaching helpless prey. His ships had plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor, shields that could deflect weapons fire that would destroy smaller vessels. Captain Sue Davis watched the Corvani ships approach from her position aboard the UHS Thunderbolt. Her ship still looked like a research station to enemy sensors, its weapons hidden behind false hull plating and its true capabilities masked by carefully designed sensor baffles. She had been waiting 3 years for this moment, training her crew for combat against enemies who had no idea what they were really facing. The Thunderbolt used minimal engine burns to adjust its position, maintaining the illusion of a drifting research platform while actually maneuvering for optimal firing solutions. Davis had studied every piece of intelligence about Corvani ship design, identifying weak points in their armor and gaps in their defensive systems. Her weapons officer had programmed targeting solutions that would exploit those weaknesses with devastating efficiency. The Corvani destroyers moved into what they believed was optimal firing range, their plasma cannons charging for salvos that would eliminate the human ships in minutes. Commander Kethler opened communications to offer the humans one final chance to surrender, confident that facing his ships up close would break whatever resistance they might have planned. Davis gave the order to fire when the Corvani ships were less than 50 kilometers away. The Thunderbolt's disguised hulls split open like a flower blooming, revealing weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Railgun batteries emerged from hidden compartments and opened fire with projectiles accelerated to 15% of light speed. The kinetic rounds struck the lead Corvani destroyer before its shields could adjust to threats moving at such velocities. Chunks of metal traveling at 45,000 kilometers per second punched through armor plating like it was tissue paper, carrying enough energy to vaporize everything they touched. The destroyer's reactor containment failed in a burst of light that briefly outshone Jupiter's distant sun. The other human ships revealed themselves simultaneously, dropping their disguises and opening fire with weapons that violated every assumption about primitive technology. The UHS Shadowhawk emerged from Saturn's rings with missile systems that launched smart projectiles, each one capable of independent targeting and maneuvering. The UHS Nightfall powered up from its hiding place among the Trojan asteroids, its particle beam weapons carving through Corvani hulls like cutting tools through metal. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Turner led his squadron of fast attack ships in coordinated strikes that overwhelmed Corvani defensive systems. His vessels were too small for the alien ships to target effectively, but they carried weapons that could cripple much larger enemies. Turner's pilots had trained for years in asteroid field combat, using the complex gravitational environment to execute maneuvers that seemed impossible to enemies accustomed to open space warfare. The Corvani destroyers found themselves fighting an enemy that used tactics they had never encountered. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the asteroid field, struck with devastating firepower, then disappeared back into the cosmic debris before return fire could reach them. The aliens had superior individual ships, but they were fighting in an environment that humans had turned into a three-dimensional maze of cover and concealment. Commander Kethalar watched his formation disintegrate as human ships picked off his destroyers one by one. The aliens had expected to face primitive weapons and desperate resistance. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had been preparing for this exact battle for decades, using weapons and tactics that turned Corvani advantages into liabilities. The turning point came when Captain Ben Hayes led the heavy battleships against the main Corvani force. The UHS Vengeance and 7 sister ships emerged from their asteroid disguises near the orbit of Mars, revealing themselves as the true center of human resistance. Each battleship was built around weapons that represented the peak of human engineering, railgun systems that could accelerate projectiles to velocities that approached theoretical limits. The Vengeance opened fire at maximum range, launching kinetic rounds that crossed the distance to the Corvani fleet in seconds. Admiral Zethkar watched his flagship's shields flare and fail as human projectiles struck with energies that his defensive systems couldn't absorb. The rounds punched through armor that had been designed to stop plasma weapons and energy beams, carrying momentum that transferred into devastating internal damage. Navigator Kate Bell coordinated the battleship formation with precision that amazed even experienced Corvani tactical officers. The human ships moved like parts of a single organism, each one supporting the others while maintaining optimal firing positions. Their coordination showed planning and training that had taken years to develop, preparation that revealed the true scope of human deception. Weapons Officer Ryan Clark fired the Vengeance's full broadside at the Corvani command ship, sending dozens of kinetic rounds toward targets that his computers had been tracking for hours. The projectiles struck with mathematical precision, each one aimed at specific systems and structural weak points that human intelligence had identified through careful study of captured Corvani technology. The alien fleet began to break apart, under sustained fire from weapons they couldn't defend against. Corvani plasma cannons required time to charge and aim, making them ineffective against human ships that could accelerate projectiles to combat velocities in milliseconds. Energy shields that could deflect beam weapons failed catastrophically when struck by solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. Admiral Zethkar ordered his remaining ships to retreat as the scope of the disaster became clear. The humans had not just built a secret fleet, they had developed entirely new approaches to space combat that made traditional tactics obsolete. His supposedly superior technology was useless against an enemy that fought with weapons and methods that violated every assumption about primitive species. The retreat became a rout as human ships pursued the fleeing Corvani vessels. Mike Turner's fast attack squadrons harassed the alien rear guard, while the battleships maintained long-range fire that prevented the enemy from regrouping. Captain Sue Davis led her ship in attacks that demonstrated human tactical flexibility, adapting to changing conditions with speed that overwhelmed Corvani response capabilities. The first battle ended with 8 Corvani ships destroyed, and the remaining 4 limping back toward Earth orbit with damage that would take weeks to repair. Human losses were minimal, with only 3 ships suffering significant damage and none completely destroyed. The secret fleet had proven itself in combat, but the real test was yet to come. Zethkar transmitted emergency reports to the Corvani homeworld as his damaged fleet regrouped near Earth. The humans were not the primitive species that Empire intelligence had described. They were something else entirely, a civilization that had disguised advanced military capabilities behind a facade of peaceful development. The easy conquest that High Command had promised was turning into a nightmare that threatened the Empire's reputation for invincibility. On Earth, President Lisa Martinez received reports of the victory with relief, mixed with grim determination. The Black Fleet had won the first engagement, but the war was far from over. The Corvani still held orbital positions around Earth, and their remaining ships could still destroy human civilization if they chose to bombard the planet. The next phase of the battle would determine whether humanity's gamble had truly paid off, or whether the price of resistance would be the extinction of their species. Admiral Zethkar's surviving ships pulled back to Earth orbit with damage that sparked and bled atmosphere into the void. The human weapons had torn through Corvani armor like it was made of paper, leaving gaping holes in hulls that had been designed to withstand the most advanced weapons in known space. 4 ships remained from the 8 that had attacked the human fleet, and each one carried scars that would remind the Empire of this day for generations. The alien commander studied his tactical displays with growing desperation as reports arrived. From across the human star system, every Corvani probe sent to investigate the human ships had been destroyed or driven off by weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The humans were using kinetic projectiles accelerated to velocities that should have been impossible, turning simple chunks of metal into weapons that could punch through any known defense. Zethkar activated the planetary bombardment systems. On his flagship, weapons designed to crack continents and boil oceans. If he couldn't defeat the human fleet, he would destroy their homeworld and eliminate the species that had dared to resist the Empire. The bombardment cannons began charging with energy drawn from the ship's primary reactor, building toward a discharge that would turn Earth's surface into molten glass. President Lisa Martinez stood in her command bunker as reports arrived from around the globe. Every major city had reported mass evacuations as people fled to underground shelters and hardened bunkers. The orbital weapons platforms that humanity had built over the past decade were powering up their defensive systems, but everyone knew they wouldn't be enough to stop a determined bombardment from ships that size. The emergency communications system crackled to life as Admiral Jake Morrison contacted the presidential bunker from orbit. His voice carried the weight of a man who knew he was about to lead his ships into a battle they couldn't win. The Liberty and the rest of the official human fleet were taking position between Earth and the alien ships, preparing to sacrifice themselves to buy time for the evacuation efforts below. Lisa activated the global broadcast system and spoke to her species for what might be the last time. Her words reached every human settlement from the underground cities of Mars to the research stations orbiting Saturn. The message was simple and absolute. Earth would not kneel, Earth would not surrender, and Earth would remember every species that threatened its children until the end of time. The broadcast was intercepted by Corvani communication systems and translated into the Empire's standard language. Admiral Zethkar listened to the human leader's words with a mixture of respect and contempt. The species showed courage in the face of extinction, but courage would not save them from weapons that could sterilize their entire planet. He gave the order to commence bombardment, and his ship's main guns began their final charging sequence. Captain Ben Hayes received the activation codes for the final phase of Black Fleet operations, while his ship accelerated toward Earth from the outer solar system. The Vengeance and its sister ships had been moving at maximum velocity for hours, using their hidden propulsion systems to build speed that would carry them into the heart of the battle. Behind them came hundreds of other Black Fleet vessels, emerging from hiding places throughout the solar system like ghosts materializing from the darkness. The human ships had been positioned for this moment since the first Corvani vessels appeared in Earth orbit. Navigator Kate Bell had calculated intercept courses that would bring the Black Fleet ships into optimal firing positions around Earth, timing their arrival to coordinate with the movements of the official human navy. The aliens were about to discover that the battle for Earth would be fought by far more ships than they had ever imagined. Weapons Officer Ryan Clark monitored the approach of Black Fleet vessels from across the solar system, each one maintaining radio silence to avoid detection until the final moment. Ships that had been hiding among Earth's Trojans and trailing asteroids began powering up their weapon systems. Others emerged from the debris fields around Earth's moon, shedding disguises that had concealed them for years among the wreckage of old mining operations. The UHS Shadowhawk materialized from what the Corvani had catalogued as a defunct communication satellite, its rocky camouflage falling away to reveal weapons that had been hidden in Earth orbit for decades. Captain Sue Davis coordinated with similar ships positioned throughout the near-Earth environment, vessels that had been masquerading as space debris and abandoned installations, while their crews waited for the moment to strike. Admiral Zeth Carr detected the new energy signatures moments before his bombardment cannons reached full charge. His tactical officers reported impossible readings as hundreds of objects throughout Earth's orbital space began showing reactor signatures and weapon systems. The humans had not just hidden a fleet in the outer system, they had concealed warships in Earth's immediate vicinity, positioned so close that his sensors had dismissed them as background clutter. The final battle began when the Black Fleet ships dropped their disguises simultaneously, revealing themselves in a coordinated display that surrounded the Corvani vessels with enemies they had never seen coming. Human ships emerged from hiding places in Earth's ring of space debris, from among the defunct satellites and abandoned space stations that cluttered the planet's orbital environment. The aliens found themselves trapped in the middle of a formation that had been years in the planning. Commander Amy Foster led the Liberty and the official human fleet in a frontal assault that drew Corvani fire away from the emerging Black Fleet ships. Her vessel absorbed plasma cannon fire that melted through armor plating and caused explosions throughout the ship's interior. The Liberty's crew fought with desperate courage, knowing that their sacrifice was buying time for the real attack to develop. Engineer Dan Foster worked frantically to keep the Vengeance's weapon systems operational as Corvani return fire began finding the range. Explosions rocked the battleship's armored hull, while Dan rerouted power from damaged systems to maintain the massive railgun batteries. His crew had trained for years to keep their ship fighting under the worst possible conditions, and now that training was being tested against weapons that could vaporize entire sections of the ship. Communications Officer Laura Stone maintained fleet coordination as the battle raged around Earth. Her voice carried orders and targeting data to hundreds of Black Fleet ships, while explosions lit up the space around her station. The human vessels fought with coordination that amazed even their own crews, each ship supporting the others in patterns of mutual defense that had been drilled into them through endless simulations. The Corvani ships began taking catastrophic damage as human kinetic weapons found their targets with mathematical precision. Admiral Zeth Carr watched his flagship's armor fail under sustained fire from projectiles that his shields couldn't stop. The humans were using every piece of space debris in Earth orbit as ammunition, accelerating chunks of metal and rock to velocities that turned them into devastating weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Turner brought his fast attack squadrons into knife-fighting range, where their small size and superior maneuverability gave them advantages that larger ships couldn't match. His pilots had spent years training in the complex gravitational environment around Earth, learning to use the planet's magnetic field and atmospheric drag to execute maneuvers that seemed impossible to enemies from other star systems. The tide of battle turned when Captain Ben Hayes brought the Vengeance and the heavy battleships into optimal firing range. The massive ships unleashed full broadsides of kinetic rounds that struck the Corvani vessels with the force of small asteroids. Each projectile carried enough momentum to punch completely through enemy ships, leaving trails of vaporized metal and atmosphere that marked the paths of destruction. Admiral Zethkar realized that his fleet was doomed as human fire overwhelmed his ship's defensive systems. The species that had seemed so primitive had revealed capabilities that exceeded anything in the Corvani arsenal. Their weapons were more advanced, their tactics more sophisticated, and their preparation more thorough than anything the Empire had encountered in centuries of conquest. The alien commander transmitted a final message to his homeworld as his flagship began breaking apart under sustained human fire. The humans were not what they appeared to be, he warned. They were something else entirely. A species that had disguised their true nature behind a facade of peaceful development. The Empire had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. The last Corvani ship exploded in Earth orbit as Captain Sue Davis delivered the final blow with a precisely aimed kinetic round that struck the vessel's reactor core. The debris field that resulted would serve as a monument to humanity's first interstellar victory, a reminder to any future invaders that Earth was defended by forces they couldn't imagine. The war was far from over, but the first battle belonged to humanity. The debris field around Earth glowed like a second ring of broken metal and shattered dreams. Pieces of Corvani warships tumbled slowly through the void, their hulls torn open by weapons that had rewritten the rules of space combat. Captain Ben Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and watched the wreckage drift past his viewports, each fragment a testament to humanity's refusal to kneel before any alien empire. President Lisa Martinez emerged from her bunker to address a world that had just discovered it was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The global broadcast reached every human settlement from the lunar colonies to the research stations orbiting Jupiter, carrying news that would reshape how humanity saw itself among the stars. Earth had not just survived its first interstellar war, it had won decisively against an enemy that had conquered multiple star systems. The victory celebration lasted exactly 12 hours before Lisa announced humanity's new doctrine to the assembled United Nations. The applause died away as her words sank into the minds of delegates who were still processing the revelation that their species had been secretly preparing for interstellar war for 3 decades. Earth would not wait for the next invasion, she declared. Humanity would carry this fight to those who threatened their homeworld. Admiral Jake Morrison received his new orders while supervising repairs to the Liberty in Earth orbit. The official human fleet would be expanded and upgraded using technology that had been developed in secret for the Black Fleet program. More importantly, he would coordinate with Black Fleet Command to plan operations that would take human ships into alien space for the first time in their species' history. The Black Fleet began dispersing throughout known space within days of the victory at Earth. Captain Ben Hayes took his battle group toward the Corvani homeworld, following navigation, data that human intelligence had gathered through decades of careful observation. The Vengeance and its escort ships looked like ordinary asteroids to any observer, their camouflage allowing them to infiltrate enemy systems without detection. Navigator Kate Bell plotted courses that would take Black Fleet vessels to every major Corvani installation within 50 light-years of Earth. Her calculations showed travel times that would put human ships in position to strike at the Empire's industrial centers and supply lines long before the aliens could mount another invasion. Attempt! The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity intended to make the lesson permanent. The Corvani homeworld of Corva Prime received Admiral Zethkar's final transmission 18 hours after his fleet was destroyed. The emergency session of the High Command convened in chambers that had not seen such crisis since the Empire's founding 5 centuries earlier. The tactical recordings showed human weapons that violated every assumption about primitive species, ships that had been hidden among asteroid fields for decades while their crews planned for this exact war. Emperor Vraktol studied the battle. Reports with the cold attention of a predator recognizing another apex species. The humans had not just defeated a Corvani fleet, they had demonstrated capabilities that challenged the Empire's technological supremacy. Worse, they had done it through deception and long-term planning that showed strategic thinking on a scale that the Empire had never encountered. High Admiral Thekmar recommended immediate mobilization of the Empire's reserve fleets to launch a massive retaliatory strike against Earth. His presentation showed deployment scenarios that would bring 300 Corvani warships against the human homeworld, overwhelming numbers that should be sufficient to break any defense. The proposal died when intelligence reports arrived from the Empire's outer colonies. The first reports came from mining installations in the Kepler system, where automated sensors had detected energy signatures consistent with the human ships that had destroyed Zethkar's fleet. The objects appeared to be asteroids until they opened fire with kinetic weapons that reduced Corvani facilities to expanding clouds of debris. By the time security forces arrived, the attackers had vanished back into the asteroid fields that surrounded every star system. Captain Sue Davis led her squadron in strikes against Corvani supply convoys traveling between their industrial worlds and military bases. The UHS Thunderbolt and its escort ships used hit-and-run tactics that left enemy cargo vessels burning in space, while their escorts searched helplessly for enemies that had already disappeared. Human ships struck without warning and vanished, without trace, leaving behind only wreckage and growing fear. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Turner specialized in attacks against Corvani communication networks, targeting the relay stations that connected the Empire's scattered territories. His fast attack ships could disable or destroy critical infrastructure faster than it could be repaired, creating dead zones in the Empire's information grid that isolated entire star systems from central command. The psychological impact of the attacks was far greater than their strategic value. The Corvani Empire had built its reputation on technological superiority and overwhelming force, conquering species through demonstrations of power that broke enemy resistance before battles could begin. Now they faced an enemy that seemed to appear from empty space, strike with impossible weapons, and disappear before retaliation was possible. Emperor Vraktol made his decision after reviewing casualty reports from across the Empire's territory. Corvani losses were mounting while human forces remained invisible and untouchable. The species that had seemed so primitive had revealed themselves as something far more dangerous than any enemy the Empire had ever faced. He issued orders that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Imperial Declaration was broadcast to every allied species and client state within the Empire's sphere of influence. Earth was declared a prohibited zone, off-limits to all Imperial forces and civilian traffic. Any species found approaching human space would be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The humans were classified as a species of unknown capabilities and unlimited hostility, too dangerous to contact and too powerful to conquer. Captain Ben Hayes received the intelligence reports while his battle group approached the Corvani Industrial world of Theknar 5. The planet's orbital facilities produced weapons and ammunition for the Empire's military forces, making it a high-value target for human operations. The Vengeance and its escort ships had traveled for weeks to reach this system, maintaining their asteroid disguises while infiltrating deep into enemy territory. The attack on Theknar 5 became the model for human operations throughout Corvani space. Black Fleet ships emerged from the asteroid belt surrounding the system and struck with coordinated precision that overwhelmed the planet's defenses. Orbital factories that had been producing weapons for centuries were reduced to expanding debris fields in a matter of hours. Weapons Officer Ryan Clark coordinated the bombardment that eliminated Theknar 5's military infrastructure while leaving the civilian population untouched. Human tactics focused on destroying the Empire's ability to wage war while avoiding unnecessary casualties among non-combatants. The message was clear to anyone who understood strategic thinking. Humanity could destroy Corvani civilization if they chose to, but they preferred to simply remove the Empire's ability to threaten Earth. Admiral Sue Davis received her promotion to Fleet Command while coordinating strikes against 12 Corvani systems simultaneously. Her new rank made her the highest-ranking officer in the Black Fleet's expeditionary forces, responsible for operations that would establish humanity's first permanent bases in alien space. The transition from defense to offense was complete, and humanity was claiming its place among the stars through force of arms. The establishment of human military bases in captured Corvani systems marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Species throughout the region watched as the supposedly primitive humans revealed capabilities that challenged every established power. Trade routes shifted to avoid systems where human ships might be operating. Military alliances reformed as species reconsidered their relationships with both the Corvani Empire and the mysterious newcomers from Earth. Communications Officer Laura Stone transmitted the final report from humanity's first interstellar base, established in a former Corvani system that had been abandoned after human attacks made it too dangerous to defend. Her message reached Earth after traveling for months through space, carrying news that would reshape how humanity saw its future among the stars. The galaxy had ordered Earth to kneel, she reported. Instead, humanity had taught them to fear the darkness between the stars. The Black Fleet was no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be something it wasn't. Human ships patrolled alien skies while their crews prepared for whatever challenges the galaxy might offer next. In the depths of space, more asteroids drifted toward distant alien homeworlds, carrying crews ready to defend humanity's future among the stars. The war that had begun with an ultimatum for surrender had become something far greater. Humanity had announced its arrival on the galactic stage, and the message was written in the wreckage of those who had tried to make them kneel. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the Aurora's edge and watched the stars through the main screen. The ship was not very big and not very fancy, but it did its job well. Jake had been flying mining ships for 12 years, and he knew what he was doing. His crew was small, but they were good at their work. Lisa Park stood near her station looking at rock samples from the last asteroid they had visited. She was the ship's geologist, and she loved rocks more than most. People loved anything. Her desk was covered with small pieces of stone and metal that she had collected from different places. Lisa always got excited when she found something new and interesting. Tony Rodriguez was under one of the control panels fixing something that had been making strange noises for the past few days. He was the ship's engineer, and he could fix almost anything with the right tools and enough time. Tony liked to hum old songs while he worked, and the sound echoed through the ship's corridors. Amy Carter sat at the communications station, checking their radio equipment and updating their star charts. She was responsible for talking to other ships and keeping track of where they were going. Amy had a good memory for numbers and could remember the coordinates for hundreds of different star systems. Danny Walsh was in the security office checking their defensive systems, even though they rarely needed them. Most mining ships did not carry heavy weapons because they were not military vessels. Danny had served in the Earth Defense Force before joining the crew, and he still liked to keep everything ready just in case something went wrong. The Aurora's Edge was chasing a large asteroid that their scanners had detected 3 days ago. The readings showed it contained rare Earth metals that would be very valuable back on Earth. Jake had decided to follow it, even though it meant going farther from home than they usually traveled. Lisa looked up from her samples and walked over to Jake's chair. She held a small piece of metal that glowed with a soft blue light. The metal was from the last asteroid they had mined, and it was unlike anything she had seen before. Lisa showed it to Jake and explained that the metal seemed to store energy in ways that should not be possible with their current understanding of physics. Jake examined the metal piece and agreed that it was very unusual. He told Lisa to keep studying it and to let him know if she found anything else interesting. The captain had learned to trust Lisa's instincts about rocks and metals because she was almost always right about these things. Tony crawled out from under the control panel and announced that he had fixed the noise problem. The ship's engines were running more smoothly now, and they could increase their speed if needed. Tony wiped his hands on a dirty cloth and went to check on the other systems throughout the ship. Amy called out from her station that she had detected the asteroid they were chasing. It was about 6 hours away at their current speed, and it was moving in a straight line toward an empty region of space. The asteroid was larger than they had first thought, and the metal content readings were even better than expected. Jake ordered Amy to plot a hyperspace jump that would put them close to the asteroid. Hyperspace jumps were faster than normal travel, but they required very precise calculations. One small mistake in the math could send a ship to the wrong place or even damage it badly. Amy worked on her computer for several minutes calculating the jump coordinates. She double-checked her numbers and ran the calculations through the ship's navigation computer. Everything looked correct, and she told Jake that they were ready to make the jump. Danny came to the bridge to monitor the jump from his security station. Hyperspace jumps sometimes attracted the attention of pirates or other dangerous groups. Danny wanted to be ready to respond quickly if anything went wrong during or after the jump. Lisa secured her rock samples and made sure all her equipment was properly fastened down. Hyperspace jumps could cause things to shift around inside the ship, and she did not want to lose any of her precious samples. She had spent too much time collecting and studying them to risk losing them now. Tony checked all the ship's systems one more time to make sure everything was working properly. The engines were running well and all the other equipment was functioning normally. Tony gave Jake a thumbs up to indicate that the ship was ready for the hyperspace jump. Jake announced over the ship's communication system that they were about to make a hyperspace jump. He told everyone to secure themselves and their equipment, because the jump might cause some turbulence. The crew had made hundreds of hyperspace jumps before, so they knew what to expect. Amy initiated the hyperspace sequence, and the ship's engines began to charge up for the jump. The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly as power was redirected to the hyperspace drive. Outside the windows, the stars began to stretch and distort as space-time prepared to fold around them. The aurora's edge disappeared from normal space in a flash of blue light. For a few seconds, the ship existed in hyperspace, where normal physics did not apply and time moved differently. The crew felt a slight tingling sensation as their bodies adjusted to the strange environment. Then something went wrong with the navigation calculations. A small error in Amy's math caused the ship to emerge from hyperspace in the wrong location. Instead of arriving near the empty asteroid field they had been targeting, the aurora's edge appeared in the middle of a very crowded star system. Jake looked at the main screen in shock as massive starships surrounded them on all sides. These were not mining vessels or cargo ships, but enormous military warships, unlike anything humans had ever built. The ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, with sleek hulls that seemed to be made of some kind of living metal. Amy quickly checked their position and confirmed that they were definitely not where they were supposed to be. According to her instruments, they were in a star system that was not on any of their charts. The system contained multiple planets and what appeared to be a highly advanced civilization. Lisa stared at the alien ships in amazement. As a scientist, she was fascinated by the advanced technology she was seeing. But as a person, she was also a little worried about what might happen next. The ships around them were clearly much more advanced than anything humans possessed. Tony came running to the bridge when he heard Jake calling for him. The engineer looked at the main screen and whistled softly in appreciation of the alien ship designs. Even though he did not understand how they worked, Tony could tell that the ships represented technology far beyond human capabilities. Danny immediately went to his security station and began scanning the alien vessels for weapons and defensive systems. What he found made him very concerned, because the ships around them carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. Danny reported his findings to Jake and recommended that they try to communicate peacefully with whoever was commanding these ships. Jake realized that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple mining operation. He told Amy to open a communication channel and prepare to send a message to the alien ships. Jake knew that first contact with an alien civilization was supposed to be handled by trained diplomats and scientists, but he did not have much choice. In the current situation, Amy opened a wideband communication channel and waited for Jake to tell her what to say. The captain thought for a moment about how to explain their presence in alien space without causing an interstellar incident. He decided that honesty was probably the best approach, even if it made them look foolish. Jake cleared his throat and spoke into the communication system. He explained that they were humans from Earth and that they had accidentally jumped to the wrong coordinates while chasing an asteroid. He apologized for any inconvenience and asked for permission to leave the star system as soon as possible. The response from the alien ships was immediate and overwhelming.